let's go to Jonathan Davis. You know what he's like. He's not going to say anything cheerful, but neither is anyone else today, so he's certainly in good company. Jonathan Davis, economist and wealth manager. Hello, Jonathan. Good morning.
Shall we say good morning? Let's just say morning.
All right then, morning. Listen, you pretty much told us this kind of thing was inevitable, didn't you?
Mm-hmm. The world and his dog, or those, the powers that be and the people who make money out of these things, they said that Gordon Brown and Ed Balls and Barack Obama and the European politicians, they all saved the world in 2009 with the bank bailouts.
They certainly did. That was a phrase we came to be very, very used to. They'd saved the world.
Indeed, nothing could have been further from the truth. What they did was compound an already massive global economic crisis. Of course, we have seen, in the last couple of years, we've seen stock markets rise dramatically until May of this year, although January actually in the United Kingdom, and we've seen apparent stabilisation of the economy. But of course, if you borrow £200 billion, which the government then did, and pump it into the system, of course it's going to have a short-term positive effect. But when you add that level of debt to already 600 or so billion pounds of debt, we are in a sea of debt, both our governments and households, and you just watch the bad debts that the banks have on their books. You just watch the home and commercial property repossessions that are going to take place going forward. It's like nothing we've ever seen.
Are you saying right here in London?
I'm saying that the power and the influence of the City of London, of global finance, is now in long-term decline. And indeed it started with the crash of 2008, although clearly they were bailed out. As global finance falls in size, you can say arrivederci to London house prices and therefore to the London economy. Absolutely.
But when you say we're going to see repossessions that on a scale that we've never seen before, are you thinking about in America, or are you thinking about Ireland or Portugal, or are you thinking about here?
In those countries, I mean, they've had literally millions of repossessions in the United States. Ireland, surely everyone knows about the problems there. Yes, in the UK, the reason why we haven't had a tidal wave of repossessions thus far, unlike previous recessions, is because, for goodness sake, isn't it obvious? They slashed interest rates from 5% to 0.5% in order to bail out, let's face it, profligate borrowers and spenders. Now that the economic crisis is again upon us, well, the banks can no longer pretend. They can no longer continue to let businesses and mortgage holders who are actually in financial stook continue to hold onto those properties.
All right, now Charlotte,
the banks will need to recapitalise, which means that they're going to have to repossess.
Okay, so Charlotte, who is producing this morning, is just saying, what is the link? She doesn't understand why repossessions. Why is that the inevitable consequence of what's going on?
Let's take, for example, the extremely highly paid people in London, particularly in the financial community. If they lose their jobs, there are not going to be any other global financial jobs unless they go to Singapore. But if they go to Singapore, then clearly they're leaving London. There are going to be lots of very high-paid people losing their jobs in London, not just in the banking sector, but in the private sector, and of course in the public sector with cuts to come, although they've been very mild up till now. And there aren't going to be high-paying jobs that people can walk into. Thus, as soon as people's savings are spent, they're still going to have their debts. There are vast debts throughout the country, and particularly in London. I'm not talking about the strange conclave in central London, Kensington Park Gardens, Holland Park. The multi-millionaires, the billionaires who buy houses with cash.
Yes.
I'm talking about high earners who have got massive mortgages. Well, it's irrelevant if it's 0.5% bank base rate, because the mortgage rate isn't, and also if you haven't got an income, you can't even service a low mortgage.
Okay, this is a question. We haven't got the euro here. They're the eurozone. We're not. We have good old-fashioned sterling. Doesn't this mean, and you can obviously correct me because I'm very likely to be wrong, but I'm asking what seems to me to be an obvious question. Doesn't it mean that we grow stronger because they are weaker, because we're not infected by their euro, so therefore we have a strengthening position while theirs is a weakening position?
No, again, it'd be nice in a sense for the Brits if that were the case, but
yes.
Again, nothing could be further from reality. Global finance is exactly that. It's global. So, our banks, which we own as a government, we own half of them, as it were, we have loaned vast sums to other countries, including in the Eurozone. So when they default, our banks are going to, just like 2008, they're going to lose vast sums of money. Whatever happens, there are two alternatives to what's going on here. I'll get rid of that call. Sorry about that.
It's all right.
There are two alternatives to what's going to happen.
Yes.
I don't know the timescale, and neither are pretty. Either our government continues to print money, which means borrow vast sums to bail out failed industries and pump it into the system. Mm-hmm. That will create either super or hyperinflation, and I'm not talking about 10%. I'm talking about within a small number of years. I'm talking about 15, 20, 30% inflation, but wages will not rise to the same extent.
Yeah.
Or the alternative is that, Greece will do, and Ireland and Portugal and Spain, Iceland has already done it. Russia and Argentina did it a decade or two ago. The other alternative is that we simply default on the debts. Either way, you watch the value of our currency will go through the floor. The cost of imports into businesses will go through the roof. The cost of living will go through the roof because, as I say, our currency falls and we import everything. We import food, we import petrol, we import heat and light, we import everything. Thus, we are in a 20-year depression.
I mean, in all fairness, you have been saying this kind of thing now in just such a way, with just such emphasis and just such an inevitability about the doom and the misery and the utter wretchedness that's going to ensue. And somehow for most people, I know there'll be some people listening who have just lost their jobs, who are finding it very, very hard to find employment in London, who are over 50 and hitting the job market and really are strapped. I'm completely aware of that. But the kind of mass wretchedness that you predict hasn't yet engulfed us, has it? Is there any possibility that you may be wrong about this or maybe overstating the case?
Well, that's not really for me to judge. I will just state the facts that, people have been led to believe that our economy is stronger than, say, Greece or Ireland. It's rubbish. You take the stated debts that our government has, and then you add on the debt, the amount we have to pay over the next 20 or 30 years for the private finance initiative, where the building of the roads and the hospitals and whatever in the last 10, 20 years. And then you add on all the pension liabilities that our government has for public sector as well as old age pensioners. You are looking at a government which actually owes 10 times its tax revenue. Now, you just think of any household with for example, a net after-tax income of, say, £60,000 a year. Imagine if they had debts of £600,000. That is the equivalence. Then add on to that the vast amount of debts that the household sector has. There is no way, as far as I can see, that this is going to end in anything other than a Japanese-style depression. They've been in depression for 23 years and counting, and the god-awful thing is governments in the West are doing exactly the same things that Japan have been doing in recent history. Don't they ever learn?
Okay, question. You're an economist and wealth manager. What do you say to your clients? Because obviously you're there to advise them, to help them, to make sure that they maximise their assets. You can't just say to them, well, hey, it's all going to be hellish. We're going to hell in a handcart. We're going to follow the Japanese model of a 23-year depression. So there's nothing I can do for you. You must be doing something. What can my lovely listener possibly do to help insulate us, our children, our grandchildren from the great brunt of what you're predicting?
Well, I've never said this on the air before, but first of all, they can look at my website and they can see what we have been doing. But in essence, we, over the last year in particular, we've been particularly cautious on our investment holdings and our wealth management, such that we were waiting for something like this to happen in the markets. Right. And we've made actually quite a bit of money in the last 2 weeks, every single one of our clients. The net result over the last 12 months is that we haven't, in fact, made a lot of money. We certainly haven't lost anything, even though the stock market is lower than May, June 2010, for example. We have been in capital preservation mode for some while, and we continue to be in that mode until the stock market experiences another 2008 bust, which it's possible is happening right now.
Blimey, Jonathan, I'm almost relieved to stop you because I've got to go to the news headlines, and for once I'm going to go bang on time. I can't bear to hear another word of it. Although we did invite you onto the programme. Thank you very much indeed